Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time here, welcome to Recap and Reacts with me, Sarah, where I just recap and talk about my reactions to certain shows and movies. Right now I am doing double duty. I am doing Bridgerton season 4 right now, and then I am doing Scrubs, which is the video today. I'm going to talk about episodes 1 and 2. This is, I don't even know if I want to call it a reboot, maybe a revival that I just did not know that I needed. I will be honest, I was skeptical about Scrubs coming back out again. I did watch Scrubs when it was back in the day. I was a little skeptical about them redoing this show again because I feel like with all the reboots out there right now, like it's scary because you don't want them to ruin a franchise. But I have to say they did a good job with this. Based on the first 2 episodes, I am pleased as punch and I am locked in. I loved what they have done with it. And I did watch at the very end of the first time Scrubs came out, was it season 9, where they had like the younger, like some more interns coming in, and then Turk and JD and all them, Elliot, they were all actual doctors at that point in time. That was good too. So I kind of feel like maybe this is it's similar to that, but a little bit different. But yeah, love it. I love it. So with that being said, let's just jump into it. So we open with episode 1, which I believe is called My First Day, I think. I'm not sure. Let me see. It's called My Return. Excuse me. So we have the first episode called My Return, and it kind of opens with JD, per usual, narrating. And by the way, JD looks great. Zach Braff, he looks good. He's 50 now, and I think the last thing I saw him in was Cheaper by the Dozen. The last time I saw him was in Cheaper by the Dozen with Gabrielle Union. And of course, that's a lie. No, last time I saw him was in the T-Mobile commercials that he does with Donald Faison. But regardless, JD looks great. He does not look 50. He looks really good for his age. But it's basically him just narrating, saying that he is a concierge doctor now. So that just means that he makes house calls to the upper crust. And he's not in the hospital anymore. So, but as he's telling this, we then cut to him standing outside of Sacred Heart Hospital, where it all began, if we remember. JD, back, on the first time Scrubs came out in 2001, JD was an intern at Sacred Heart. So he was at Sacred Heart because one of his patients, she collapsed at a soccer game of her grandson's, and I believe that was probably the closest hospital that she could get to. So she is at Sacred Heart. So he walks into Sacred Heart, and one of the first characters we are reintroduced to is Carla. You see Carla at the nurse's station doing what Carla does. She's standing on top of the counter or the desk, and she says, I guess she's in the ER, and she says, no one and another patient better not come to me unless someone basically is having a baby. Do not come up to me and ask me how much longer it's going to take. Shut it up. And then JD says, how long is it going to take, Mamacita? And she turns around, doesn't know it's JD, and she says, Bambi! And remember how she used to call him Bambi when he was an intern at Sacred Heart. So she runs and embraces JD, and she asks if Turk knows that he's there. And he's like, no, I haven't told him. And then you cut to Turk in the operating room, and he says, JD's here. And then all of a sudden you see Turk and JD, like Turk runs down the hallway and they see each other. And then JD says, Eagle! And, that was something that they used to do back in the day. And JD jumps on his back and Turk's back starts going out. just to show that they have aged. And Turk just collapses. And Carla looks at them and she says, I think it's time to retire, Eagle. And they do. If you can't tell just how like the smile on my face, I'm so excited about this, but it just brings up memories. This is where nostalgia actually is hitting the right way, and I just loved it. So after, Eagle, it segues into the introduction of Scrubs, which it's still the same introduction. The I'm No Superman, that song, yay! It's the same introduction. Obviously the people have changed, but it's still the same way they've done it, the way they edited it. It is still the exact same, and I love it. So yay. So JD and Turk and Carla are talking, and Carla says, well, since you're in town, we should all go out to dinner. And Turk says, baby, is it okay? Because we can just have man time. And it cuts to us finding out that Turk and Carla have 4 daughters now. They're all girls. So Turk has 4 daughters now, which is so crazy. But yeah. So, of course, Carla acquiesces. One thing I do want to point out, though, really quick is I did notice that Judy Reyes, who plays Carla, she is a special guest star. So I don't think she's going to be a permanent cast. I guess she's just going to be coming in and out. Whereas before, on the original, she was, I believe she was a permanent cast, but she's just, I guess, going to be just have a recurring role throughout the season. So just FYI. So after that, while walking down the hallway, of course, JD's having his inner monologue being enveloped with the nostalgia, and he's walking down the hallway and he ends up being in front of the supply closet that him and Elliot used to interact in. And we find out that him and Elliot are divorced. I will be honest, y'all, I do not remember. I have not watched the last episode in Scrubs in years. And I thought he was with Kim. I don't remember how, I do not remember, but I didn't know him and Elliot got married. But anyway, they're not married anymore. They got divorced. So Elliot still works at Sacred Heart too. And they end up running to each other in the hallway. And she asks, like, what is he doing here? And in fear of causing a scene, for old time's sake, they go back into the supply closet. And so they're having a discussion, and they kind of talk about that they have been in couples counseling together, trying to navigate this post-divorce life and how they're supposed to talk to one another. So they're just basically discussing that. JD goes to greet his actual patient. She mentions that she's been admitted, and he's like, I don't understand why she's been admitted, or tells the patient that he doesn't understand why, but he's going to ask. And so we are introduced to a new character, Dr. Park, and I cannot remember what else he has played in, but I mean, I've seen him before, but on something else I just cannot remember. But anyway, Dr. Park comes in, and JD says, trying to be nice, kind of nice, nasty, because he's annoyed. He says, her labs are normal for a woman of her age. But Dr. Park disagrees because she still has been complaining of, I believe, abdominal pain. And so they go out to the hallway so they don't argue in front of the patient, and they have a discussion. And basically Dr. Park is like, you suck. And then the incomparable Dr. Cox comes in. Hey! Dr. Cox is here. So Dr. Cox is now the chief of medicine, which I do think we did know that from the previous series. So Dr. Cox is still the chief of medicine. Dr. Kelso no longer is there, but Dr. Cox is the chief of medicine. JD being JD still gets so excited because, Dr. Cox is JD's mentor. He gets really excited to see him. He's like, well, he can't call me newbie anymore. And Dr. Cox says, hey, oldie. So that's his new nickname from Dr. Cox is oldie, not newbie anymore. Dr. Cox is trying to diffuse the conversation or the argument between Dr. Park and or JD, excuse me. And JD's like, well, you just let him know that we are basically on even ground. And Dr. Cox says, au contraire, Dr. Park here graduated first at Stanford, and was top of his class. So Hello. So he's like, you were not on the same field or playing field. JD tells him, both of them, he says, okay, well, run, I think it's our arterial gas, blood gas test or something. He tells them to run the test and they will find out who was right. And so with that, they do that. And then Dr. Cox and JD go walking down the hall, and Dr. Cox is filling JD in on everything. So Dr. Cox tells JD that there's a new group of interns and he can't say what he wants anymore. Because if we remember how Dr. Cox used to have these monologues, that was like the one thing that did annoy me, but that was something that he did. He would always have these monologues on how he would read the heck out of people. Yikes. He says he has to watch what he says at all times. He decides to have one of his iconic reads at that moment. This lady, this redheaded lady, and I believe her name is Sibby, comes out and she says, Dr. Cox? And he says, yeah. And she's like, I'm gonna need you to take it down a notch. So every time she says with Dr. Cox, take it down, she always does this to take it down, and it's the funniest thing. But I guess she's like the HR lady. I'm not sure exactly what her title is, but yeah. So I think she's like HR there for the hospital. And so Dr. Cox tells her, he's like, I thought I had 3 strikes. And she says, you have about 900. And then she kind of smiles and just walks off. And Dr. Cox says, she's like the feelings police. And JD says, the feelings police. And he has his infamous daydreams. If you remember how JD always used to have his crazy daydreams, and then he goes into a daydream about being a feelings police, and it's hilarious per usual. Dr. Cox is making the rounds with the interns, and then he asks JD to fill in for a moment, and this is where JD actually realizes that he misses teaching. We cut to Turk doing operation with interns, and he is doing operation. While he's doing an operation, one of the interns named Tashana, she asks him if she can close, and Turk kind of just very monotone is like, no, just watch. And Turk says, and I quote, I wish this guy would die all at once instead of in tiny pieces. And the 2 interns that are there just look at each other in disbelief. Then we cut to the 2 interns post-operation out of the operation room. They're like, Dr. Bummer is not going to take our spirit. And as they're walking down the hallway, they pass by the desk and JD's sitting there, and JD rolls to them in his chair and he says, this is what I missed, the hot goss. Who's Dr. Bummer? And they look at him because they know who JD is to Turk. And one of the interns says, I don't know the other intern, the surgical intern's name. I just know Tashana, but I don't know the other girl's name yet. But I will probably in time will learn during the show, because I don't know if they ever said it. But anyway, so the other intern says, no one, it's definitely not your best friend. And JD is like, Turk's not Dr. Bummer. And they were like, Tashana's like, yes, he's awful. And then he's like, no, he's not. You just have to tell him, what's up? Remember that back in the day? He said everything will be fine. And then JD rolls to Carla and he's like, is Turk, like, did you know Turk is Dr. Bummer? And Carla says, Turk has been in a really dark place. And then we're reintroduced to Hooch. Hooch. We remember Hooch every time we saw Hooch, because he always looks crazy. I was like, Hooch is crazy. And Hooch came back. So that's another character that we're reintroduced to. So that was nice to see. And then Hooch is like, are y'all talking about Turk or Dr. Turk? And he's like, prayers up. And he looks crazy when he says it, and he walks off, and JD's like, is Hooch still crazy? And Carla says he's worse. And so then JD also was given the results of the test for his patient, and we find out that he was correct. Back with the interns, there's a group of interns, and a man from outside comes in, and he says his wife is in the car and she's not feeling well, like her stomach hurts. And he's like, is there any way anyone can just come out and look at him? And he says, so there's this one intern, he's the hot guy. I don't think we know his name yet. I'm not 100% sure, but in my notes, I have him as the hot guy right now. Because he is called like They keep making like snide comments that he's gorgeous and pretty, and he's cute. He's very attractive. Anyway, so there's a guy that comes in, asks if he can have help, if he can go look at his wife outside, and the hot nurse or the hot doctor says she has to go to the ER. And he says, right, but it's just going to be, a lot of medical bills that we can't pay. Can someone just like look at her? And hot doctor says, sir, you can't order medical care from your car. And the guy says, okay, thank you. Sorry to bother you, and leaves. And another guy, another intern, he's British. Don't know his name yet. He's British. And he says, hey, you were being really harsh to him. And the hot one tells him, if you want to go help him, then go ahead, and walks off with another intern. This is one of the first times that we're talking kind of about like real life issues that people do have problems with medical bills, and how medical care is just very expensive in America right now, and or always has been, but it touches on one of those issues with medical care and how people can't afford it. So JD, back with JD goes and tells Dr. Cox and Dr. Park that he was correct and that the test results were normal for his patient, and that he deserves an apology. Turk is there to support him per usual, and Dr. Park says he'd rather circumcise himself than apologize to JD. And Dr. Cox is like, looks at JD and Turk, and I'm like, you two are perfect for one another. So JD, feeling great about himself, decides to ask Turk what's going on with him. So, like at the beginning of the episode, it was mentioned that they were going to go to dinner. So JD asked Turk what's going on, because he knows he's going to a dark place after that conversation that he had with the interns and Carla. And Turk doesn't want to talk about it. JD pushes him and says, why didn't you tell me what was going on? And Turk says he's burnt out. He's exhausted. He was like, his patient today that he had with the interns, he's like, he's a perfect example of why I'm burnt out. He's just going to go ahead. I'm going to tell him to do what he's supposed to do. He's not going to do it. And then he's going to be back in the OR room. And then he's going to die on my table. And then his family's going to look at me and ask, how come I couldn't do more? And he was like, back in the old days when you were here, we could go up on the rooftop and have a couple of beers and talk about it. But we don't have that now. And there is no joy in this place. And Turk has tears in his eyes. And I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm just like, oh no. So, because, Scrubs is good for these kind of moments. But anyway, I digress. JD says, how come you didn't reach out to me? And Turk says, you can't relate to me anymore. You're writing scripts in the suburbs. And then Turk says, you know what? I don't want to have dinner. I'm good. And he leaves. And that's a sad moment, because Turk was always so fun and lighthearted, and so it is hard to see him like he's like not in a good place. But Donna Faison, good job on that part. So Dr. Park leaving the hospital at the same time. Dr. Park asks if JD's doing okay, and he says not really, and he says good. And JD asked if Dr. Park discharged his patient, and he said no, because Dr. Cox wanted to keep her for another day. The next day we find out that Turk did go to dinner, not with him, but with another character we're reintroduced to, the Todd. Yes, that Todd is still there with his cut off sleeves and his little bandana, and he is still there. And so Turk says he went out with Todd because he went to blow off steam, and he knew with JD it was going to be a therapy session. So of course JD, being JD, was very upset and hurt and storms off. This is in the cafeteria, and we cut to Elliot talking to Carla and how she's annoyed with Dr. Cox, who's sitting next to them, about how JD is at the hospital. Dr. Cox says, weren't you the one who ended the relationship? And Elliot's like, how do you know that? And Carla's like, I have no idea, alluding to Carla was the one who told Dr. Cox. And Dr. Cox is like, girl, we go back way before y'all got here. We talk about stuff all the time. And then Dr. Cox, being himself, drops a little gem and says, For years and years in the history of all relationships, the person who typically ends the relationship has the hardest time moving on. So we go into the next scene where JD confronts Dr. Cox about why his patient is still admitted at the hospital. Dr. Cox told JD to hold on, and he's with the interns doing rounds. So Dr. Tosh, who we find out is an influencer, she's doing a procedure that earlier in the episode Dr. Cox asked if she was ready for, and she told Dr. Cox that she watched a TikTok with Dr. Randy and she should be ready, but she was a little nervous to go into the procedure because Dr. Cox is watching her, and we know how Dr. Cox is. He's intimidating. So Dr. Cox does one of his iconic monologue reads. He's reading this girl, and then Dr. Sippy says, Dr. Cox, I'll see you on Saturday for our feelings or for some type of seminar. And he was like, it was worth it, and walks off. So then JD kind of steps in and guides Dr. Tosh through the procedure. And she ends up doing it correctly. So after that, the interns are walking off celebrating, except for the hot doctor, which you find out his name is actually Blake. So Blake is kind of just behind all of them. He's like in the back of the group, and they're walking, and JD kind of stops him and says, hey, Blake, don't alienate yourself from people. And he's like, you're really going to need people at this job. And Blake says, okay. And he said he's not like some kid like all the rest of them, so he'll be fine. JD tells him you're going to need someone. And Blake says he has to go, and then he leaves. So in a rare moment of vulnerability, Dr. Cox sees the interaction that JD just had with Blake and tells JD that that's why he kept his patient here another day, because he wanted him to see how good that he is at what he does in teaching people. Because Dr. Cox pretty much says that he just does not have the patience anymore. And, you know, the way he stepped in with Dr. Tosh and was very patient and guided her through the procedure, he can't do that. And he wants him to have a job there. And JD says, are you serious? He thinks he's messing around, which I'm not going to lie, I did too. And Dr. Cox says, no, he was serious. And he was like, stay. Dr. Cox tells him to think about it, and then he leaves. The next scene, Tashana, if we remember, she's the surgical intern. She asks to speak to JD. We don't see them speak, but all of a sudden you see JD walking with Tashana to the operating room. And JD tells Tashana to tell Turk what she told him. And Tashana basically says that, during med school, she had kept hearing how great Dr. Turk was. And she chose Sacred Heart for him, and seeing how he is the only Black surgeon in the hospital, she just kind of figured that that would be her guide. She says that, the other surgeons just listen to Coldplay on loop and mention how articulate she is. And again, him being a Black surgeon, she thought that he could be her mentor. So JD says, okay, well, let's go, so he could think about what you said, like in an angry voice. And then Turk says, no, Tashana, you stay, you can close. So kind of a full circle moment. Turk goes in the operating room, and while Tashana's scrubbing up, Turk tells Tashana, and also this brother likes Coldplay too, and starts playing Coldplay. And then Tashana and the other intern look at each other, and they're very happy. So it looks like Turk is coming back to life. So wrapping up this episode, if we remember, JD pretty much has his, has a closing monologue, the narration at the end of the episode. He's walking down the hall, and he mentions how, the universe sometimes will give you signs, and sometimes not good ones. And we see JD's walking into where the reception area is, and we see the EMTs there, and one of them is doing chest compressions, and he's asking what's going on, and she says a heart attack, but we're trying, and then says she didn't make it. And we find out that it is in fact the gentleman in the beginning of the episode, or midway through the episode, that asked Blake, the hot doctor, to check his wife. That was his wife, and she has now passed away. And the man tells him, all you had to do was just go out and check on her. And you can see Blake is like, his face is stricken. He's in shock. And the British guy tells him immediately, it's not your fault. JD nudges the British guy to go help Blake, because he knows the British guy has great bedside manner and is compassionate. And the British guy tells Blake that it wasn't your fault. And Blake is like, it would have took me a minute or 2 minutes to go check on her, and now she's dead. And he's like, it could happen to anyone. So he said and Blake was like, he should have did something. And so another full circle moment, a teaching moment. And so after that moment, JD goes and tells Dr. Cox that he'll take the job. And he said it will be one of his greatest honors to work alongside Dr. Cox. And Dr. Cox says, perhaps I wasn't clear. I should have been clearer. You're not going to be working alongside me. You're going to be me. So JD, unbeknownst to him, just took the job of the chief of medicine of Sacred Heart. Which kind of means that we're probably not going to see Dr. Cox that often, if we see him at all. I'm not sure. Because Dr. Cox is such a staple. And I do want to see Dr. Kelso too. But yeah, JD tells Dr. Cox that he's like, he can't be him. And Dr. Cox says, you don't need to be me. You need to be you. And he's like, I see how you've been with these interns. This world has passed me by. And he's the only one, JD is the only person that Dr. Cox trusts to take this job. He also mentions how Dr. Park is going to hate him because he wanted that job too. So he's like, you're also going to have to deal with that too. And Dr. Cox, being Dr. Cox, when he mentions that Dr. Parks will hate him for that, he said, that will keep me warm inside. And so that was just a little sarcastic moment. JD's inner monologue, or his narration, comes on, and he says he's never been a boss, but he knows he can't do it alone. And with that was the episode. But there is a scene of the closing credits, or like when the credits are rolling, there's a scene where JD and Turk are actually back on top of the hospital on the rooftop having a couple of beers. And so just like old times, in another full circle moment, because you know how Turk said how they used to be on the rooftop and be able to blow off some steam after work and could talk about the day, and there they are doing that. So that was the first episode of Scrubs, which it was such a great episode. I loved it. I was very surprised, pleasantly surprised. My dad had said that it was really good, and my dad's a tough critic. So, yes. So it was such a good episode. It is like I said at the beginning, it is the reboot / or revival that I did not know that I needed, but I am here for it. So good job. Great job. So I was going to do the second episode in this video, but I think I'm just going to cut here, and then I'm going to do a second episode on the second episode, or a second video on the second episode. So please like, comment, subscribe, all those fun things. Thank you so much for coming and watching this video. I hope you are as excited about Scrubs as I am. Because like I said, with this reboot culture, some of these are some epic fails. But so far, so good with Scrubs. I hope they can keep the momentum going. So I'll see you in the next video to talk about Scrubs episode 2. Bye!